study, and we just ask that you would continue to bless us with yourself and your Spirit and your Son. Help us to understand how to live in your world in a new way, and help us to understand how you've been committed to setting the world to right on our behalf, and how we can join in your goodness. Thank you for everyone here and everyone arriving, that you just continue to fill us with your wisdom and your love. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Morning. So this is number 4, right? Number 4 of our series, The Righteousness of God in the Old Testament, the story of his efforts to make things right. And we're doing 4 of 12. So 6 this semester, 6 next semester. A quick review. We haven't met for 2 weeks.
I'm going to quickly mention it. I probably won't fly back from California to see these, but I'm tempted to, because they've been good.
Okay. Expensive flights.
I suppose I can get on the internet also.
We can put you on Skype. Skype might be cheaper. A quick review. It's been a couple weeks. So let's review where we are at, or how we got started. I gave the big picture, and I think it's important to have the big picture in mind. Makes reading the stories much easier if you see the big meta-narrative, the direction where everything's headed. So Act 1, God creates heaven and earth and appoints human vice-regents to rule the earth on his behalf. Act 2, the human vice-regents rebel against their liege, leading to chaos and corruption on earth. You notice there's an immediate, and I think there's an immediate pattern. God picks somebody to do thing, and that somebody has problems with doing it. Okay? We start from the very beginning, right? God appoints humans, and they say, we don't really want to do that. So they rebel. God calls into existence the kingdom of Israel as his tool to end rebellion and restore his rule on earth, but the kingdom joins the rebellion. Okay, so God creates another group. Okay, you're going to be my group, and you're going to help me fix everything. And they say, no thanks, we're going to join the other group. So we have that story going on. And then finally we have God sends his son as the embodiment of faithful Israel, and this is the one person that actually does not rebel. So we have 2 parallel stories, and a third story where you think, here we go again. God picks somebody, and that person is going to rebel. Actually, he doesn't. And he's faithful all the way through the end, fulfilling the mission of Israel, and calls the church into existence as his tool to end rebellion and restore his rule on earth. And the New Testament promise that church will be faithful to the end. That this church is constitutionally different from Israel and from all of humanity. It's a new thing that God has done. Humanity 2.0, if you will. That the church is going to pull this off. Now, as we look around, we think the Bible's overly optimistic about the church, about who we are. But then I would disagree. I would say God knows us, and God knows what he will do with us, and knows our destiny. So, with all our flaws, the church will remain faithful as his tool to end rebellion and restore his rule on earth. And Act 5, of course, is the final act in described in the book of Revelation, as well as actually prophetic books. God restores his rule on earth and renews all creation. Okay, so that's the big picture. The first week we looked at creation authority, and we ended we had a discussion about humanity created in the image of God. And we talked about how human beings are created as kings and queens to rule over the earth. And that was summary of Act 1. And a couple of quotes from C.S. Lewis and Elmer Martins. C.S. Lewis, in reference to Queen Elizabeth, said, the coronation of Queen Elizabeth in 1953, says, the pressing of that huge heavy crown on that small young head was a symbol of the situation of all men. That Lewis gets what the Bible is getting at. Humanity is created for kingship. And where she's like, she's a queen, she's different, we're commoners. No. Humanity elevates the individuals to be the image of God, to represent God on earth. On a line being the brutish animal, 1 being the brutish animal, and 10 being God, humanity is an 8 or 9. A high view of humanity. That was our talk of chapter 1. Very important understanding of God and human relationship. Okay. The fall and consequences. By the way, questions on this one? Okay. This one first week. The second week we talked about the fall and consequences, and we laid out the way in which once the humans rebel, what happens to the world. And we have rebellion, expulsion, we have fratricide, we have violent retaliation. God is now working. He's preserving a single line to redeem the world in some way. He's producing that. He's got that line going on. But so you have the world and you have a single line. And the single line is just being preserved. And then I would argue that the flood was really the part of the preservation of the single line. The single line was in danger of being wiped out completely. There's no good people left except that one line. So what are you going to do? Well, you need to start over with that single line. And then finally, we end with the Tower of Babel story, and which is really where humanity is at currently. Humans divided into squabbling, warring tribes who unite based on similarity and dislike what is different, and wants to destroy what is different. So, and that's where we end up, Genesis 11. And that sets up the stage for last week's, not last week, our last time when we talked about the call of Abraham, the kingdom of Israel. And where Abraham is called to become a great nation and will bless and be a blessing to the world via the process of people who bless you, I will bless, and people who curse you, I will curse. Abraham is called into a nation which serves as a litmus paper, a litmus test for the rest of the world. And that is the process by which blessing to the world happens. This, I say, is the program for the entirety of the rest of the Bible. Okay. And just for the Old Testament, you can see precisely that. Genesis 1 through 11 deals with a basic problem. This whole primary history is from Genesis to Kings, one large story edited by exile or post-exilic editor that ties the entire storyline together. And if you look at the idea of God making Abraham into a great kingdom, the four elements of kingdom: people, law, land, kingship. And that is precisely the order of what happens here in the rest of the Old Testament story. You have the people, patriarchs, Genesis 12 to 50, and then deliverance of that people and creation of that people finally in Egypt, and then the laws, and then the land. And then we have a book on the failure of the people, which actually extends backwards and forwards, and we'll see that. And then finally, the final section is on kings, with a great name, appropriately entitled Kings. What is the book focused on? Kings. Why is it focused on kings? Because the people fail. And they need a king to do something about all of this. And when the kings fail, the whole experiment, the whole solution fails. And then we need to draw some conclusions about why is the Old Testament shaped this way? That's going to be a great question. Okay. And that was last time, and we had we went through Genesis 12 through 50, and we had some selections. I know I basically put all the material in here. You guys got to choose, and I believe we chose Jacob and Judah, and we had a chance to talk about. But it's basically this last part of Genesis is a storyline about kind of the DNA of God's people. Now, who are the patriarchs? Who are the ancestors of God's people? And when I say God's people, I'm using that intentionally, not Israel, because we're God's people as well. It's our ancestors. This is the DNA that goes into who we are, and we have faith, being the main thing about Abraham. Isaac's mostly warning, and then Jacob was a life transformed. And we saw that fascinating passage on the wrestling story, which is just amazing. Amazing artistry and authorship and literary skill. And then Judah, the dramatic turning point, the hiding of critical information until the end, until we get to the point where we realize, wow, what did Judah do? Judah restored the covenant family by his act of self-sacrifice and becomes the essence and defines the essence of kingship as the love, the willingness to sacrifice oneself for the brother because of the love of the father. And that was how we ended last time. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Well, then we start today with Exodus and Mount Sinai and the revelation of Yahweh. Okay. It's very. And let me set it up a bit. We're back to this chart. We're done with this section. We're now in this section and in this section. I will today talk about deliverance from slavery briefly and focus on the Ten Commandments. And then the cultic stuff, I will talk about next time. Actually, when we get to the temple, I will start talking about what does all the cultic stuff mean. And then, what I mean cultic, let me back that up, sorry. In biblical scholarship, cultic does not mean David Koresh. Cultic refers to elements of public worship. So when I mean cultic, I'm talking about sacrifices, ceremonies, feasts. That's what I mean by cultic. Sorry, cultic material. So what I mean by that is today we're going to talk about the Ten Commandments, and then there's a whole bunch of stuff on cultic laws dealing with ceremony, with cleanliness, all those kind of things. I will save that till later. So it will come back, okay, but not this time. So we're doing these two, primarily the Ten Commandments, and then the deliverance from slavery section. And when I'm doing these two, I want to focus on one aspect of this that I think that's underplayed, which is, if you notice from the beginning of the story, we learn something about God from the very get-go, Genesis 1. God's a creator. And he establishes, he evaluates, he gives commands, and then he says, my image, human beings, they're my image, so image of God. After that, the storyline has really been driven by humans. Humans rebel, God reacts. Humans rebel, God reacts, until Genesis 12, in which then God calls a nation into existence and then helps them with stuff. But once you get there, the storyline quickly is focused on humans again. Right? It's focused on Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph, and Judah, and all these people. It's really about what's going on with them, and God's kind of in the background, kind of doing things. And we learn a few things about him. He, of course, is committed to his creation. He's doing something about redeeming the world and fixing and putting things right. But what is this God really about? What is his character? Okay? That really hasn't been the focus until we get to Exodus, in which you'll notice the only individuals we really look at is really Moses. We have one individual human, and the rest of it is really focused on God. Okay, so we're going to get to kind of who is God really, and the text is very much focused on this as well. Okay, so to set things up, you know Exodus story well enough that we're not going to read much of it, at least not the passage that you usually focus on. Because we're not doing the plagues and all that kind of stuff, and the crossing the Red Sea. Presumably you will go and watch Charlton Heston or what's the more recent one? The Prince of Egypt, the animated version. They're probably going to make another one soon, right? It's like every 30 years they're going to make a new Exodus story movie. I want to make a couple points. So the storyline in Exodus begins with God confronts a power that enslaves his people. God punishes his power. God brings about his total defeat. And then God delivers his people from slavery into communion with him. This is the signal act of salvation in the Bible. When the people think about salvation, they got Exodus on the brain. If you see it in the Old Testament prophets, we're in exile now in Babylon. We need a new Exodus. God's going to opening up water again. God's going to get us through the desert again. When you get to the New Testament, Jesus hangs out in the wilderness for 40 days. Right? He's doing that Exodus thing. Right? He's doing the, we're always thinking new Exodus. Salvation is always involved, is hearkening back to Exodus. So these are the foundational elements dealing with the concept of salvation. Salvation in the Old Testament deals with a removal of, you have his people being enslaved by a power, either political power or spiritual power. In the Old Testament, the spiritual power is also in view, It's obviously not forgotten. And later on we're going to see a passage that talks about the gods of Egypt. Okay. However, the focus primarily on the political power, or the manifestation of that spiritual power, which is the political power. And the defeating of that power and delivering people from slavery into communion with him. Okay, so that's, in the New Testament, Jesus redefines this and says, no, the Roman Empire is not the enslaving force. The satanic, the world of sin, the dominion of sin, that's the enslaving force, and the Roman Empire itself is part of this slavery. They're also enslaved themselves. And that's really the big problem. And salvation in the New Testament, God delivers the people from slavery to sin into communion with him. Okay. So that's salvation. Any questions on this? This is just kind of putting that out in front of what salvation, how salvation is understood in the Bible. Situation. Egyptians forgets Joseph. Remember last time we talked about Joseph becoming this, he's a golden boy. Everything he touches turns great, just one of those kind of kids. He's the teacher's pet. Okay, whatever. But anyway, he does well. And but the Egyptians forget Joseph and begins to fear the Israelites instead of viewing them as a blessing. Remember, those who curse you, I will curse. Those who bless you, I will bless. Right? They're beginning to see Israel not as a source of blessing, but as a source of danger. And the Egyptians begins a program of genocide. I'd like to also make a point here. There's a lot of people who have questions about how can God do all these horrible things to the Egyptians? Okay, the 10 plagues, killing the firstborn, it's just not very nice. God seems kind of mean. Okay? And I always just say, have you read the beginning of Exodus? This is a group of people who considers a national policy to drown babies. Okay. The Pharaoh orders it, his soldiers carry it out, his people carry it out. Nobody rebels, nobody says, hey, we can't do this. They all go along with this. This is a infanticide as national policy. Okay. Now,
worried there's too many Hebrews, is that why?
Yeah, they're worried about too many Hebrews, they were trying to kill them all. And slowly, by taking baby boys and dumping them into the Nile. Okay. That's the kind of people they are. I don't have a lot of problems with them getting their comeuppance. Sorry, I have a thing with babies. I love babies. And this is just the idea that you can actually have that kind of inhumanity. You can throw them into the river and watch them drown. That's sick. Okay? And the degree of evil that is present in the human world, we sometimes forget that. We forget how much evil there is and how much salvation for us, for them, is really not about, oh, I get to go to heaven. It's, please fix what's wrong. Right the wrong. Fix the injustice. They're crying out for making things work here on earth. Okay? And that's where, we don't have as much of that, so we live in a relatively just society. Relatively. Yeah. And we forget. And how can God be so mean? Yeah, well, have you seen the people he's dealing with? We forget. So God initiates a program to deliver his people via his chosen servant Moses. And here, this is where there's two very important passages right at the beginning that sets this program for revealing who God is. Okay, that this act of salvation is going to in some way define who God is, and we're going to see that through the salvation and also through the commandment, the 10 Commandments. So this is a passage you're probably familiar with it. This passage gets preached on a lot, usually from the perspective of Moses, like as in being called to something, to do something. So Exodus 3, Moses is now in the wilderness. He's being a shepherd, and his people are being systematically killed off. Okay, genocide is happening. He's run off. He tried to do something about it, didn't work. He left. So God called him, and he told him, "I'm going to send you to get my people out of Egypt." Just as a thought on that. Let's say so being in the desert really means you're out of organized society. So let's say you're living in, say, the Mojave Desert somewhere, hanging out in there, and you see a vision, and a God, who's your ancestor, calls you to say you're to go to Washington D.C. and to negotiate the freedom of your people, the Californians. Okay? Now, the question on your mind is, I'm going to go to the White House and talk to the president about getting the Californians out of the United States of America. Okay? Just think about that. Okay? That's kind of a rather daunting task. And the reason I pick United States is because Egypt, at that time, is one of the world's superpowers. Premier military superpower. Okay? So just going to put that as a backdrop. This is not something you do lightly. So Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" And God said, "I will be with you. And this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you." So here's a sign. This will help. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Is that a helpful sign? See, you will know that I sent you, because when you get out, you will come here and worship me. Moses is not an idiot. Okay? Now, if he accepted that, he would be a man of incredible, I would say almost unconscionable faith.
What mountain are they on?
This is, well, this gets a little complicated, but this is the mountain that's in the Sinai Peninsula, where he runs into God. This is outside of Egypt.
Is it in
It's Sinai.
Promised Land?
No, not in Promised Land. So in between. This is in Sinai.
Okay.
Okay. So he's out there doing his, a shepherding thing in the wilderness, outside of Egypt, outside of Canaan. And God said, here's a sign. You will bring them here and worship me. That will be the sign that I sent you. And that's a heck of a thing. And Moses, of course, pretty smart, said to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? Then what shall I tell them? Okay. I'll get to that. I'll come back to that. God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you're to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name you should call me from generation to generation. Okay. What is going on in this passage here? And first of all, we need to clarify a little bit of the Hebrew. There's no getting around it. The only way to sort this out is through Hebrew. Because otherwise it's just a mess.
Because there's just to hopefully highlight it. Because there's I am who I am, and Lord. 3 different ones, right?
Yeah. So God is giving Moses the etymology of his name. So let's start backwards real quick to find out where we are. We're here. He says, what is his name? Then what should I tell them? And God said to Moses, I am who I am. And that is what you're to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers. So let me just clarify those issues there. So the Hebrew is now transposed. Actually, the first one you can't tell the difference because it's repetitive. But it's going left to right now. Okay, the letters are right to left, but the order of the words are left to right. God says to Moses, "Ehye asher ehye." Okay, ehye is from the hayab, meaning to be verb. I will be, or I am, or I will be, or I will cause to be. All those are possibilities. I am asher, it's just which or that. So this is actually Popeye. I am that I am. You guys watch Popeye? Yeah. Popeye the Sailor Man? Because it's way too old for you guys. I am what I am that I am. I am what I am. Okay, so I am which I am. Which, what does that mean? Right? You can get at some of it, right? You can even go try to figure out the meaning. I am that I am. I am which I am. I'm entirely self-referential, right? I'm dependent on no one. I am that I am. My existence is bound onto me. Maybe something ontological or metaphysical, or even could be attitudinal. I am that I am. It's precisely what Popeye's getting at. Okay, I'm bad. If you want to put it in 90s terminology, they don't do that anymore.
Connecting to Popeye jumps us ahead, a couple thousand years. Connecting to that is another couple of decades.
Yeah,
almost there. Charles.
We're almost to present. So what's the right way to say this in the knots or I guess we're the teens now?
No idea.
Okay, it's like
connected with the Popeye one.
Popeye's getting old. Yeah, Popeye's getting way back
How
there.
about just do it?
I don't know. It's like I am. That's really all there is. Ahye asher ahye. So you start with this phrase, and the phrase gets shortened in the second time. I am sent you. So I am now becomes a name because the sent is third masculine singular. So I am now. He turns this phrase and he says, I'm going to drop off 2 of them and shorten it to just ehye. Ehye has sent you. Okay? That's no problem. So God's name, which is sometimes people translate it, I am. Right? You hear that all the time, the great I am, right? People do that all the time. They're coming out of this passage, which the full phrase is I am, or I will be that I will be, or I am that I am. People argue maybe sufficiency. I will cause to be what I cause to be. I am totally sufficient for the task at hand. Some people argue that. Whatever it is, you're kind of guessing. I am sent you. Now this is the move that's most perplexing. But once you get Hebrew, it's not perplexing at all. You'll notice the consonants. There's a W that shows up, which really matches the Y. It's a historical weird thing that happens. But really, what's going on is you drop the initial little half circle. What are those things called? Little round thing, and you added a Y. Okay. What's happened is we've switched from first person to third person. Instead of I am, it becomes he is, or he will be, or he causes to be. Okay. So it doesn't make sense for me to call God Ehyeh. Right? It's like Ehyeh. No, it doesn't make sense. God says Ehyeh, and he says, you know what? We're going to go with Yahweh. Okay? Or we think it's Yahweh. We're not really sure how that word is pronounced. We know it's for sure it's Yah. The weh part, we're a little hazy on. Okay? Why do we know it's Yah? Because hallelujah. Right? Eliyahu. All those Yahs showing up on all those names. Okay, so Elijah, Eliyah. Those Yahs tells you the first syllable of God's name is Yah. The last part we're not sure. But we're going to go with Yahweh for now. You switch to third person. Okay. So he is. Or just Yahweh. So go ahead.
The 3 milliseconds in the second line.
Sorry, not millisecond. 3 masculine, third masculine singular.
Thanks.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, third masculine singular. 3 milliseconds. I like that.
That's
He sent you in 3 milliseconds. Yeah.
Now, so
Yeah.
the half circle E becomes a Y.
A Y, yes.
It looks like the YE becomes a W.
Y becomes W, yep. You got it.
Well, Y and E.
Y and W are very similar things. And basically what happens in the ancient W moved to be a Y in contemporary biblical Hebrew. Not contemporary, wrong choice of word. By the time of this is written, contemporary biblical Hebrew doesn't make sense. That's an oxymoron. So we move to a Y. So W and Y's are kind of mixed things. They go back and forth.
So why isn't it YH, YH?
It could have been, but they're preserving the more ancient form. Older W's became Y. So when you talk about God's name, they preserve the W.
Okay, but, and then it looks like the Y, am I correct, the YE became a W?
Forget the E. You're thinking about the vowel now, so forget the vowel for now.
Okay, because that's a vowel.
That's a vowel, yeah. Just keep the consonants in play, and you'll see that the little thing there, that's Aleph, it's actually a consonant. That's switched to a Y. That's really the big difference. We went from first person to third person.
Okay.
So we went from I am to he is. So if you read it that way, what you have in this text is, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, God of your fathers sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What should I tell them? Okay. One of the great questions that people have in this text is, what do you mean, what is his name? Don't they know his name? In Genesis, all over Genesis, from Seth, he's calling the name of Yahweh. Abraham knew him as Yahweh. All these people knew him as Yahweh. So how can they not know his name? Right? And this is a big part of documentary hypothesis that people come up with, and this is supposed to belong to a document in which Yahweh was not revealed until this point. Okay, I would say this to them, which is, whatever the sources they are in the story, what's important about this is that you notice God doesn't answer that question directly. He doesn't say, oh, Yahweh. He explains the significance, the origin of the name. Right? What is his name? Let me just, for one, some people argue that Ma Shemo is not a good translation. Because if you see in Judges, where they ask the angel, what is his name, the Hebrew there is Mi Shemacha. Me, who is your name? So it is argued that Ma Shemo doesn't ask the question, what is your name? It asks, what is the significance of your name? And Mi Shemacha means who is your name, or what is actually your name? So there's different ways of asking the question. And I think that's a very good interpretation of this. Think about the context. I go to the Israelites, the God of your father sent me to you, and they said, really? And what is the point of this God? What is the point of his name? What has he done for us? We have been in Egypt for 400 years, being slowly killed off and being worked to death. This is a work camp. Think of it. We're worked until we die, and their kids are being systematically slaughtered. That's what they're trying to do. What does his name really mean? What does Yahweh really mean?
He'll cause it to happen.
And then God said, and his answer is, I am who I am. That's where, you know Yahweh. Do you know the etymology of Yahweh? So God does a word study. like a good sermon, exegetical sermon. He does a word study on Yahweh. He says, Yahweh comes out of Ehyeh, Asher Ehyeh, which then becomes Ehyeh, which I'm going to turn to the third person. And he says, Yahweh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and God of Jacob, has sent me to you. That's my name forever. That's the name you shall call me from generation to generation. That's the name. Okay. Now, it's not about what is his name, it's about his significance. And in fact, this idea of focusing on God's name shows up again in Genesis. Oh, let me back it up. Let me just clarify this passage. So Moses asked, who am I? Okay. Did God say Moses? Right? The passage is not about identity. If we're reading surface words, this is where locution, illocution, perlocution is such a helpful distinction. Searle's a speech act theory. Familiarity with this? Okay, Searle argues for when we give speeches, when we talk, we're doing things with our words. So that's his book called How to Do Things with Words. And in which he makes distinction between locution, illocution, and perlocution. Locution is the word themselves, the literal things. So, who am I? That's the locution. The question is, what are you doing with who am I? Illocution. Is he asking for information? God, I forgot who I am. Who am I, God? Right? I have amnesia. Who am I? God would say, you're Moses. Okay? That would be one illocution. But that's clearly not the illocution here. The illocution in Moses is, don't send me. I'm of no import and significance. I can't go to the greatest power on earth and challenge them and take their people out, their slave force out. I can't do it. That's the illocution. The perlocution, the intended response is looking for is, God says, you're right. Don't worry about it. I'll find somebody else. Okay. God gets the illocution. He says, well, it's not you who's doing it. I will be with you. Don't worry. Right? So that is a successful communication. Even though on the locutionary level, it doesn't work. Who am I? I am with you. How is that an answer? But when we read this, we go, that's a perfectly good answer. Right? Even though right on the literal level, it's like, he didn't answer the question. And then Moses said, they will know what is your name. What should I tell them? And once again, the answer, it isn't asking, oh, I want the name Yahweh. What's the point of asking for the name? That's lame. No, the question is, what is the point of your name? Can you do this job? Is maybe the bigger question. Yes?
How is the allocution then different from when Jacob asked for the name of the being he was wrestling with?
What's the illusion there?
And what in this text leads us to not ascribe the same kind of intention here?
Right. Right. So I would say the way God answers the question,
Okay.
right? He doesn't give you the answer. He gives you the etymology and then the answer. Okay? So that I would say there's a different illocutionary force here being posed, which is, they're going to ask me this. What's the point? What is the meaning of your name? And you need to give a better answer because it's been 400 years. A lot of people have died and suffered. Okay? So you need to you need to kind of tell us what you're about. Okay? Can you pull this off? Because it's not merely can Moses pull it off. Really the question is, can God pull it off? Now that sounds strange to us. Okay? That sounds strange to us. But in a world where lots and lots of gods exist, okay, are you big and bad enough to take down Egypt? That's really the question. I am who I am, God says. They will not believe me. Okay, that's good enough. That actually is a direct answer. I'm going to give you a sign, a miracle that they will believe you. I'm not eloquent. I will be with your mouth, and then please send someone else. Okay, that finally, okay, this is the ultimate elocution. This is what he's been getting all the whole time. And God gets angry and says, I'm going to bring Aaron along and he'll help you. Okay. I think that this idea of presenting God's name is so important that it shows up again in chapter 6. Okay. They get to Egypt, that people believe. Moses has a little chat with them, and then what Pharaoh does is Pharaoh says, okay, they've obviously had too much time on their hands. They've been busy making bricks, and now they're talking about going away to the mountains to worship their God. They want a vacation. I'm not up for that. Mm-hmm. We're going to say, no more straws. You need straws to make bricks. We're not going to give you straws. You have to go find straws and then make bricks, and we're going to keep the level of required bricks at the same level. So you need to go find straws and make the same amount of bricks, and that's a new plan. So the people started complaining to Moses. Moses falls apart, complains to God. And that's our new situation. Now we're now in Egypt. And then, so God comes back with this. The Lord said to Moses, now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. Because of my mighty hand he will let them go. Because of mighty hand he will drive them out of his country. God also said to Moses, I am Yahweh. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as El Shaddai. But by my name, Yahweh, I did not make myself fully known to them. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, where they reside as foreigners. Moreover, I have heard the groaning of Israelites, whom the Egyptians are enslaving, and I have remembered my covenant. Say to the people of of Israel, I am Yahweh, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of Egyptians. I will deliver you to from their bondage. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with a great act of judgment, and I will take you for my people, and I will be your God, and you shall know that I am Yahweh your God, who has brought you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. You will know that I am Yahweh. Okay. Now, you shall know that I am Charles makes no sense. Okay. You're not Charles. What does that mean? You shall know. No. Unless there's a meaning to the term Yahweh. I am Yahweh makes no sense. It's just a sound. It's just a title. Yahweh has meaning. Okay. And God is making a distinction between El Shaddai and Yahweh here. He says, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob knew me as El Shaddai, but they've never seen me as Yahweh. We're not talking about names, because that's just silly. I'm changing my name. Woo-hoo. No. There's something else big time going on here, and so that they will know that I am Yahweh. I will live out what Yahweh means fully. Okay. So let's think about what that might mean. Well, if you look at the story of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, how is God portrayed in Genesis 12 through 50? What does he do in those passages? Well, he calls Abraham out of the Ur of the Chaldees, puts him in Canaan, and says, I'll give you this land. Did he give him the land? No. Didn't give the land. When Sarah dies, his wife dies, he needs to go buy land to bury his wife. Okay, this is all mine. Oh, I had to go buy a piece of land. Okay, so for burial ground. Nothing happens in his lifetime. He had a kid. That's pretty cool, right? He was saved from the Egyptian and the Philistines. He almost lost his wife twice. God gave him dreams and a little bit of disease, and so he got his wife back. He got a kid under miraculous circumstances. His son Isaac did the same thing with the Philistines and almost lost his wife. Got it back. Got her back for him. Rebecca was barren for 20 years. He prayed for her, and she had kids. Okay, that's good. Jacob had some problem with his own family, had some problem with his uncle, came back home. His sons, they got through a famine okay. What has God done during these times?
Kept the line alive.
Kept the line alive. He is serving as a tribal deity, opening wombs, producing children, protecting people from losing a wife somewhere. Okay, he's doing those what we call providential things. Right? He's doing providential things, and I want to make a point about that. I frequently hear this. That there's a big distinction. People have problem believing Genesis 1 through 11, and they no problem believing Genesis 12 through 50. Okay, and it's precisely because of this. The God in 12 through 50 is much, much smaller. It's El Shaddai. He's being a tribal deity. He's just opening wombs and taking care of people. God shrank down from Genesis 11 to Genesis 12, which is why we have a much easier time handling him in 12 through 50. Not because the text changed in any way. Like the author saying, oh yeah, 1 through 11, that's more of a mythical stuff. 12 through 50, that's more the believable human stuff. There's no change in literary genre whatsoever. It just, our plausibility structure says we have an easier time believing God who deals with individuals and deal with problems on an individual level. Opening a womb that is barren, God can handle that. But the whole Tower of Babel thing, we're a little shaky about that one. Okay. So I just want to just point that out. I would say today, we have an easy time believing in a tribal God. God who takes care of us. But we have a serious problem believing in, we have no problem believing El Shaddai. We have serious problem believing in Yahweh. Okay.
I know you're going to keep going, but can I quickly clarify? So God Almighty is El Shaddai.
Yes.
What are the words, in 6:1, what's that, the Lord there? What word would that be?
Now, that either could be a mistake on my computer software program. If it's lower L with a lower ROD, that's just Adonai, normal word for Adonai. If it's capped like this, that's Yahweh. Okay. So if the software is screwed up, then that may be Yahweh. But if not, it could just be Adonai. In fact, this is the Lord, which makes me think that maybe there's a mistake on the software, which means that really should be Yahweh. Is it Yahweh? Yeah, okay. The first one, 6:1. But basically, there's a mistake in my software. Because usually you wouldn't say the Lord. I don't know.
So you think that's Yahweh?
That's Yahweh, yeah. So Yahweh said to Moses.
And your God, what word is God?
Elohim or Elohe. Elohim.
So,
Elohai.
so what's God Almighty again?
God Almighty is El Shaddai.
So El Shaddai, Elohim, and Yahweh.
There's a whole lot of other ones out there too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's more.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. There's a whole lot of names of God. Yeah. It's describing his attributes.
Describing God.
Describing God's attributes. And ways to talk about God. And here, God is making the point that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob saw El Shaddai. He's a sufficient God. He's a God who provides things for you. Okay? God Almighty, which is like, oh, God Almighty sounds really good, but El Shaddai is really not about that. Whereas Yahweh is going to do something, Yahweh's going to kick ass and take names.
So there's something special, like Yahweh, something extra special about
Well, he's going to tell you what Yahweh's going to do.
Okay.
I mean, this passage defines what Yahweh for you, right? You Israelites are going to see God as Yahweh. How? I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will deliver you from their bondage. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm, with great acts of judgment. Okay, I'm going to do some serious ass-kicking, name-taking. Okay, that I will take down the greatest superpower in the world. I will destroy their army. Okay, the vanguard of their military I will wipe out. So you have a tribal God who's doing birth, and now taking on the United States Air Force or the United States military. Okay, you got your M1, A1. See, now if this was written today, it'd be like, okay, you will take out you got your M1, A1s, you got your F-22 stealth fighters. I will take them all down. Okay, God's going to act on that kind of level. God is moving from El Shaddai to Yahweh. He's moving from tribal to world historical stage. Okay, he's moving to the big leagues.
How does the term El Shaddai or God Almighty in any way suggest smallness? I mean, it really seems like that's the one that should fit.
Yeah.
Fit the
you would think
names punching every chariot in the face type.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. You would think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
so
it's just how it ends up being
translated. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I would say probably comes out of the Greek and Latin, and I would say translators may not have seen the distinction here as clearly. That there's an intentional distinction made here between the God of the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which they experienced as El Shaddai, and then the God of the Egyptians, the Israelites are going to see. They're going to see something totally different.
So were the names Elohim, El Shaddai, or Adonai unique to God, or was it sometimes a name that's used for another God also?
Okay, so that's a good question. Yahweh is the only one that applies to God exclusively. El is kind of a generic name for God, and then you add things to it to kind of make attribution. El Shaddai, El Yon. There's different ways you can.
Rapha.
I'm sorry.
Rapha.
El Rofe, El Yareh. He will provide. So
what's the thunder god? Marduk? How would you say?
No, there's Marduk. That's Marduk.
El Marduk?
No, El Marduk, just Marduk.
Okay.
Yeah. So El is away in Canaanite region. In fact, the high god of the Canaanite pantheon is El. Okay, so El is a generic name that gets used elsewhere and becomes specified. Elohim is also a generic name. Okay, Yahweh is God's specific name. This is the only God that's called Yahweh is in the biblical God. Okay, and it just means I am that I am. Okay.
Charles,
yes.
Is the word Shaddai related to like might specifically, or is it not?
The problem is the meaning of that word is unclear.
Okay.
That's one of the problems right there.
This is kind of what the translators
Are dealing
guess,
with. Yeah, they're guessing. My guess is God Almighty comes out of the Greek and the Latin, in which they just kind of, it's God, it's got to be good, So Almighty, Omnicrator, He's omnipotent, that kind of stuff gets thrown in there. But the Hebrew word, as I remember looking up, is Shaddai. It doesn't show up much. It doesn't. I think something like sufficiency, the God of sufficient, God is the God of sufficiency. It's not clear. Yeah. Okay.
Charles?
Yes.
Go on.
You said today we have no trouble believing in a tribal God,
Yes.
but not in Yahweh. What do you mean by that?
Well, because first of all, you notice the plausibility structures. Most people have problems with Genesis 1 through 11. They have no problem with 12 through 50. We haven't. Our plausibility structure of this world allows us to believe in supernatural acts in small doses.
Well, because I remember like years ago there was a science magazine.
Yeah.
Like, in France, every time at the time of Christmas and Easter, very much like here, they like to choose a biblical topic.
Yeah.
And so it was this sort of vulgarized science magazine, very popular in France.
Okay.
And it stated that Genesis 1 to 11 was sort of mythical,
Right.
whereas starting from Genesis
12 through 50 becomes historical.
it could be historically based.
Yes, and the reason, like I said, there's no change in style and genre, but there's a change in the degree which God is acting, universal versus very narrowly individualistic, and the change in the storyline brings about. And like I said, okay, I agree. In our purely rational modern mind, okay, there's no supernaturalism is out among the the really scientist people, but among Christians, I would say, we are supernaturalists, but we believe in supernaturalism, but only in small doses, and that's what I mean by that. That we have a hard time with Yahweh as Yahweh, the big picture stuff, the creation, the taking on Egyptians, the crossing the Red Sea, the really big stuff. We have a hard time. That's my impression. And confirmed repeatedly by people who tell me there's a gap between 11 and 12. And that they have problem with 1 through 11, but they have no problem with 12 through 50.
So I understand what you're saying. I'm trying to think if there's other evidences of that. I understand what you're saying in terms of 1 through 11 and 12. Yeah.
Right.
So if a person is thinking about those things,
Right.
they have an easier time with this one than this one.
Right.
But do you think that's reflected in other kind of general modern thought?
I think it leads to the question, it's part of the mindset that faith is individualistic and faith is private. Just like God relates to Abraham on an individual level, we don't think of God as being an actor on the world stage and operating in terms of taking down universal powers, superpowers, and doing acts of redemption, great acts of redemption in history, operating the level that CNN would be forced to report this. Right, because it's big. It's like, whoa, okay, somebody just lost all their chariots. Wow. Okay. We don't think along those lines. And we have a harder time thinking along those lines. But that's my impression. Okay.
Charles, why doesn't the Lord actually give Moses that bit, I am the Lord, I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians back at the burning bush? Isn't that what the point was when he's saying, what is your name? He's actually saying, how shall we call on you? I mean, how shall we call you? You haven't
done much of anything.
400 years.
Right.
So How come? Why is the Lord waiting to reveal?
I think that's a very good question. So my first instinct usually is dramatic tension. We're moving from chapter 3 to chapter 6. Chapter 3 was just for Moses, and he gave him enough to say, okay, my name is Ehyeh. I will be sufficient to pull this off. By the time we get to 6, now we've confronted the first failure. The first attempt was a complete disaster. The people fall apart. Moses falls apart. Okay, and then God says, you know what? Maybe I'm going to fully explicate the meaning of my name now. Yahweh is Ehyeh, yes, but it really means this. This is what I'm going to pull off, and you will all know it. I'm going to start acting in a way that people will be absolutely convinced that I am Yahweh. So it's a good question. I would perhaps just argue that the narrator thinks it's a better dramatic, more for the sake of drama.
Is that all there is, or is there something to do with the Lord saying, this is ineffability you're dealing with here,
Yeah.
so I will not be called on your terms, or is there any other place in the Old Testament where the Lord's again making this clarification, I'm Yahweh, and in this situation, this is the salvation I will bring forth?
You mean clarification of what Yahweh means?
It means, yeah.
Yeah.
This is a very, very particular
Right.
situation.
Well, first of all, for example, it shows up repeatedly in this passage. Right, this is kind of what you're getting at. This is by no means, this is what I'm saying, this is a major theme at the beginning of Exodus. The explication of God's name. Okay? The revealing, God's name being revealed to the world as Yahweh. Not in the sense that it wasn't known, but the meaning of it being revealed. Chapter 7, verse 17, by this you shall know that I am Yahweh. Behold, I will strike the water that is in the Nile with the rod that is in my hand, and it shall turn to blood. I'm going to make sure you know I'm Yahweh. On the day I will set apart the land of Goshen, where my people dwell, so that no swarms of flies shall be there, that you may know that I am Yahweh in the midst of the earth. 10:2. And that you may tell in the hearing of your sons and your sons' sons how I have made sport of the Egyptians, and what signs I have done among them, that you may know that I am Yahweh. So it's all focused on the Israelites, right? I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and all the gods of Egypt. I will execute judgments. I am taking down the national deities of Egypt. I am Yahweh. I can do this. I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them, and I will give glory over Pharaoh and over all his hosts. And so what? The Egyptians shall know that I am Yahweh. Verse 18. And the Egyptians shall know that I am Yahweh when I have gotten glory over Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. So this theme of knowing that I am Yahweh repeats itself. Now we could probably do a search on this, the I am Yahweh business, rest through the rest. I was focusing on this passage alone. But for the rest of the Bible, this is a big theme. Okay? Yahweh has a meaning, it has a significance. And knowing that the God of Israel truly is Yahweh and everything that it conveys is a critical part of this story, revealing who God is. So
you saying the name of Yahweh was or was not known before?
it was known, but not understood. Okay.
How do you know that?
That's what.
How do you know that it was known?
Oh, look at Genesis.
Well, but that depends on when it was written, doesn't it? If it's written after this event,
Yes.
and the writer already knows the name, he could start using it in the earlier text.
Right.
Yeah.
So you would say this. You would say that the author is a bit of a bumbling fool, in that when he's talking, when the patriarchs are talking to God, they refer to him as Yahweh. He shouldn't have. He should have preserved it until the revelatory point here. And that would be the argument.
If he, well, I wouldn't say he was a bumbling fool, but
He didn't smooth out the storyline.
it could be that given that his audience already knew the name,
Yes.
because it's post
Right.
this,
Right.
that he decided to tell his audience earlier and that this is the God we're talking about.
Right. And so that the patriarchs refer to God as Yahweh and worship Yahweh. And then, but the problem with that is then when you hit this story, it's like, well, I thought they knew Yahweh already, right? So that would be the problem. It would be a stylistic problem in the storyline.
Okay.
Right. That's all. I mean, it's possible. And what you're proposing is what you're proposing actually is part of documentary hypothesis, which is the idea that the documentary hypothesis argue that chapter 3 and chapter 6 belong to two different documents. There's two different revelations of Yahweh as God's name, and whereas what you're reading in Genesis, part of the third document, which actually knew Yahweh's name from the very get-go, and there is no revelation in that one. So that's what they did. They turned this into evidence of multiple documents. And I would say, okay, except whoever wove it together did a poor job. So we're stuck with that.
Well, it depends on who their audience is and what their intent is when they wrote it. So,
Right.
What are the earliest known compiled copies of the Pentateuch?
Dead Sea Scrolls. Very late. Yeah. The earliest complete one we have dates to 1006 AD. That's the complete one.
Yeah.
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 But if you Dead Sea
I don't
Scrolls,
mean
yeah.
the oldest one we have. I mean the oldest one
We
know
got
of, or that we have.
the Dead Sea
strong
Scrolls.
evidence.
Dead Sea Scrolls. We have chunks. We have
When
books.
do we conjecture that they were written?
The Dead Sea Scrolls
Yeah,
around 200 BC, roughly.
200 BC.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have nothing earlier. So
Pretty early though, isn't it?
no, not close enough. The problem here is that Moses could be as early as 1400 BC or 1200 BC.
So it's still 1,000 years after him.
Yeah, and then so
And
there's
so-
a whole lot of biblical scholarship on the arguing the dating and the composition of the Old Testament, and none of it has any documentary data to support it. They don't exist. Is really fundamentally the problem. You know, you end up with people writing the document, the book of J, and then they go ahead and say, okay, here's J, and here's a document. They create this thing, and then we realize once you pull things apart, you can't create actually independent documents. So that doesn't work. So there's a lot of theories out there, and they're still going along. It was kind of the major biblical studies pursuit for about 100 years, until people got tired of it in the 60s and the 70s. Like, this is really dumb. We're getting nowhere. Because you can sit there and argue and pull apart and say, well, now what? And what ended up happening is what I'm presenting here are actually results of literary authors who says, let's look at the final form. Does it make sense? And if you begin with the assumption that it does, you create such dramatic readings that the historians never thought of reading. The historical-minded people wouldn't read it this way. They read go, oh, they didn't know Yahweh, so God's telling his name for the first time. And he did it twice, chapter 3 and chapter 6. And I believe this is P, chapter 3 is E. And then the Genesis part where Yahweh shows up, that's all Y. The Genesis part where God shows up, that's mostly E. Genesis 1 is P, Genesis 2 is J.
Dividing it into different
Just documents. They're weaving together documents. So the Old Testament scholarship is really, for about 100 years, from the late 19th century to about mid-20th century, was just zoned in on this topic. And now, except for a few Germans left, the rest of us are going, this is really boring. Okay, no offense, it just got boring. And not only got boring, it became utterly unfalsifiable. You create systems, pulling verses together and create these really cool things. Somebody comes and goes, no, I think this belongs over here. How do you know any of you are right if there's 0 documents? And that the earliest piece of anything Old Testament writing is from the Dead Sea Scrolls. And sorry, we also have an amulet about this big. That's from the Book of Numbers, about 1 verse on it. That dates around 500 BC. That's all we got. So with that minimum amount of data, the kind of precision they were going after becomes silly. I think there are sources. I think whoever wrote this used sources. But I also believe strongly in their artistic abilities. So what I don't want is, and what you don't end up with is, they left together seams in the stories. Like, there was no Yahweh in Genesis. You know, those kind of scenes. That's just to me, a weird way of reading the text. So, but if you take a class at UW on Old Testament literature, you will get a JEPD taught at UW. And if you go to grad school level, you will learn more of the other theories that are out there. They're still running about. Anyway, other questions? I'm not saying, yeah.
Well, so going back, it seems like you're saying,
Yeah.
if you take it as it was written the way it was meant to be written,
Yeah.
essentially,
Yeah.
that it's dramatic and it makes sense, and that
Yeah.
God's reiterating,
Right.
God is retelling who He is because they need to hear it.
Right. And this is the thing that's observed over and over again between what we call the literary critics and the source critics. The literary critic says, you know, what you think of as being seams in the text, when we start reading from the literary glasses on, it looks like dramatic features. So it's all really your starting point. Do you have an assumption of a very simplistic author writing simple texts, in which the moment least amount of conflict, oh, that's just different sources, woven together by somebody very inartistically, rather poorly, or a sophisticated author, in which all the lines and the fissures you see are features. So really it's about assumption, and really to a certain extent says a lot more about the critic than does the text itself. When you read the Bible, what are you reading? What do you see? Oh, the snake story. That's an etiological story explaining why humans don't like snakes. Okay, if that's what you want to do. Okay, if you see ancient people as being so simplistic in their thinking, that's all they're doing with their mythology. Okay, but that says more about you than about them. You see the problem? And when I just said that, I wasn't making that out of nowhere. As a lot of people read it that way. Okay, so it's about our view of the ancient world and about how they write scripture and how they write their stories, and yeah.
So how did the Egyptians record their history? Did they only record their victories, or did they also record other significant events like this?
So highly unlikely that they will record anything like this. Most history is propagandistic history. So Israel actually is unique in that way. When they write their history of their own people, they write it as a disaster. Okay, which is really unusual, that they sit there and talk about how mistaken their people are, and their patriarchs make mistakes, and their leaders make mistakes. Whereas everywhere else, it's all about rah, how wonderful we are. And that's just standard. When we write national history, that's how it goes. So, for example, there's no mention of Exodus anywhere else. Unlikely Egypt would record this. The Babylonians, for example, will mention the fact that they actually attacked Judah, and what he says, which scroll is this? Talk about shutting up Hezekiah like a bird in a cage. Okay. And that goes directly to the story in the Kings, where Hezekiah, Jerusalem was preserved. Okay, it matches actually perfectly. And what's great about that is that happened because if they actually conquered Jerusalem, they would have said something about that. So we get to put a nice picture on it. I shut him like a bird on a cage. Yeah, except you are Babylon. You're like superpower, and you can't take out a small little dinky country in Canaan, right? So you see that they're forced to put lipstick on a pig, if you will. When they run into problem. Yes.
So the historical scholars buy this history, right?
You mean, wait, depends on who you're talking about, historical scholars.
Like at the UW, say.
Oh, you mean you're talking about study of ancient Israelite history.
Or world history. I mean, they say that Israelites left Egypt.
Okay,
somehow.
so now you're getting into a different field. Okay, so I've been talking to you about biblical interpretive field. We're talking about purely on the history side. About 10 years ago was a major debate between the maximalists and the minimalists over how much you can use the Bible as basis for reading history. The maximalist says, yeah, of course there's David, there's Solomon, there's some kind of an Exodus. It may not be as big as we mentioned in the text, but and then the minimalist says you can't really use any of it. The whole thing is a post-exilic propaganda to justify land grab. Okay, and these minimalists then are tied into today's Palestinian rights issue. So politics ideology gets right involved. You're using, because think about what is Israel doing today. They're doing major archaeological work, okay? And everything they do, they go, oh, that's this. That's Jacob's well. That's from that city. That's Jericho. Israel's archaeology is very ideologically focused. They're trying to establish that we have original rights to this land all the way back to Abraham. Okay, David, Solomon, we have always been here. And then the people who favor Palestinians are saying, no, using the Bible to justify a land grab. Just like you did after the return from exile. Okay, so this whole, what you're asking the question about historical discussion is so politically fraught that you publish the wrong thing, you're basically mud with one half of the field, because you're obviously a Palestinian sympathizer, or you're favoring the Israeli colonizers, and you know. So basically, it's really hard to walk that line anywhere. So, you had a comment over here.
I was just going to say that the critique you're doing, just like you did so many 2,500 years ago or so, is a little bit funny, because that means that they are then saying, like, well, at least part of the Bible is true. So,
so a lot of people are invested in the truth of the Bible, historical truth of the Bible. Okay, Israel is, modern day Israel is. Okay, and then there are people who are invested in arguing for the complete ahistoricity of the Old Testament for political reasons as well.
But somebody who was completely opposed to the historicity of the Old Testament probably wouldn't say you're doing just like what happened back here, because they wouldn't believe that what happened.
Oh no! They would believe
the Nehemiah.
They would believe Ezra Nehemiah.
Okay.
So Ezra Nehemiah is well established. You have to have it, because where did the Jews come from by the time the New Testament rolls around? Okay, so they would say there's a blank before the Jews moved into the area. Everything below that, before that, is just some kind of mythic thing that this people wrote up to justify them taking this land.
Taking it post-Babylonian exile or post?
Well, when Persians let them go home,
Yeah.
they're saying, look, here's a text. We used to own that land, and the Persians, Cyrus says, sounds good, go ahead. And they go and they take the land, right? And they use this whole elaborate story to justify ownership of that land. Okay. So that's one way of reading. Now, I say that political minded. I'm saying that the field is politically fraught with minefields. There are people looking for this, and the problem really is you have nothing else. You have recordings from ancient worlds that are tangentially related, but when it comes to the stories of Israel and even further of the patriarchs, there's just no reason why they'd be recorded by anybody. Okay, so the only source is the Old Testament. Here it is. What are you going to do with it? And that's kind of where you're stuck. Yeah, there's limits to how much you can find out about the history. Doing, historiographical work. There's not enough data left, given how far our current manuscript is from that history. Some assumptions have to be made, and those assumptions all say a lot more about us than about the text. You can assume that the Israelite people were writing a story about their own history, own people. That's roughly correct. It's a good place to start. Or you can say the whole thing was made up. There's nothing like Israel the way it was described. And you can go with a lot of theories, oral history, source critical theories, a lot of theories out there, and none of it, I could say, you could hold with much firmness or certainty, because we have no documents to prove any of it. That's the problem. Somebody published a book called Working with No Data. That's our field.
How does this compare to the amount of data that we have about
Jesus? No.
Yeah, that would be.
So Jesus is New Testament world is so well documented. The wealth is huge in comparison. For example, we have the life of Jesus being presented to us by people within a generation. Within 20 years, as people were writing letters about him, like Paul. Paul wrote a letter Galatians, late 40s, Thessalonians, within 20, 30 years, there's all the stuff about him. Stories about Jesus being passed around and probably referenced in Roman history by the 60s. So it's just like, that's within a couple of decades. People are still alive and they remember all this stuff versus the Old Testament situation.
Right. So how does that compare then to, say, like, Herodotus, Thucydides, like classic Greek historians? Well,
they write about things that are pretty far off and long ago.
Right.
Yeah. So here's the thing: is that traditionally we've always accepted their version of history, simply because there's really nothing else, right? And people call into question here and there, but you cannot do history in the ancient world the way you do history today. Okay. Usually you have one dominant storyline written by some guy, couple hundred years after the fact. Now what? So you go with him. You either go with him until you find evidence otherwise, or you have a skeptical stance and say the whole thing is nonsense. I mean, I don't know, you do history. What do you do with those ancient world historical texts?
I'm not like specialized in ancient history, but I'm thinking of, Julien, you've exchanged with him.
Right.
Yeah, that's what he does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can either take a maximalist approach, which is assume the historicity unless proven otherwise, or you can take a minimalist approach and say, I don't assume anything here is true unless I can be corroborated elsewhere. And that's really the maximalist minimalist distinction. It's really about where you start.
But even if it's not, quote, even the notion of what is true and what is not true actually is different, I think, when you look at documents like that, because it will still be like a testimony of the culture and
Absolutely.
the worldview, and
right.
even
And they don't write history.
Even if it's fake.
They don't write history the way we write history.
Exactly.
It's very different rules. Okay, we kind of digressed a bit into I think a fascinating discussion, but we do need to leave. Any last question or comments on this?
Charles, but whatever you said in the last half hour is very dangerous stuff, right? I mean, we do realize that, don't we? I mean, you've taken off any kind of rational evidentiary legs on which so much of the Old Testament stands.
Yes.
And you have really said it's in the eye of the beholder.
Yes. Which is why the theological assumptions are critical, right? And so maybe we should get to the payoff, which is why do I read it the way I do? It's because I am fundamentally, we don't start with a belief in the historicity of the Old Testament. We start with faith in God, who then revealed himself to us, a trustworthy account of his dealing with humankind. So it works the other way. We start with theological framework of inspiration and revelation and authority of Scripture, and then we arrive at this.
You literally take it on faith.
You literally take it on faith, yeah. I mean, you can start, you can do quite a bit. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of archaeological stuff that can corroborate details, but the broad scope and there's nothing else besides the text here. So if you're going to take a skeptical stance, there's nothing here. You'll be lost in a swarm of theories, which biblical studies people have for a couple of generations, and now are so tired of it. Even just general biblical scholars, not Christian ones, are like, let's just read it. Let's read the final form and see what it actually says. And so we have a lot of final form critics who says we don't care how it got what it is. We want to know what it looks like and what it means currently as it stands. And the frustration with the atomization of the text ultimately gets you nowhere. So, okay. We did this part already. The second half. Yikes. Okay. We get the second half. So we left Exodus we left the crossing the Red Sea, and we're now at Mount Sinai. And I'm still talking about the revelation of of God's character. Okay. And here, for the first time, we're going to get a systematic treatment of who our God is and what He's interested in. Okay. Which is really cool. This is what's so great about the Torah, the law, the commandments, the mitzvot. Why? What is it about? What is God about? And unfortunately, it doesn't begin with our, God is a spirit, eternal, existing, omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent, existing equally in three persons. It just doesn't go that way. Okay, it doesn't write that way. But we'll see how it goes. Let's read this passage. The covenant begins in chapter 20, but we have the basis, motivation, and purpose in chapter 19. So there's the mountain now. Moses went up to God, and Lord called to him from the mountain. Is that Yahweh again? Something's wrong with is that
Where?
This Lord here? I'm just getting a little ticked by this. By
Yes.
this. It is. It's rats. Something's wrong with my Bible software. Yeah.
Yes.
Something wrong with my English translation of this one. It's just poorly edited. Called to him from the mountain and said, "This is what you are to say to the descendants of Jacob, and what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom, a priest, and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites." So Moses went back and summoned the elders of the people and set before them all the words the Lord had commanded him to speak. The people all responded together, "We will do everything the Lord has said." So Moses brought their answer back to the Lord. Okay. So a couple things. The basis, the motivation for the covenant is gratitude. Right? It's God's salvation act. Salvation comes before covenant. God acts, takes him out of slavery, does this amazing thing, and in recognition of God's greatness, in recognition of that he is Yahweh, in recognition that he is this great God who took him out of suffering, they're going to participate in this covenant. And I think I defined covenant before. Covenant is a non-natural elected relationship with divine sanction. Okay, so it's not natural like brothers or sisters. It's not like a blood relationship. It's elected. It's a choice. And once the relationship is created, the violation of this relationship is to be punished by God. Okay, so this is which is why a marriage is really the best example of that. It's non-natural. You don't marry your brothers and sisters. It's elected. You choose, and it's really about a relationship, not a contract. So some people use contract to explain covenant. I think that's a very poor way to understand covenant. Contract is a exchange of goods and services with monetary whatever exchange this. And once you're done with the exchange, the relationship is over. A covenant is primarily relationship oriented, as you will see right here. The basis of this covenant is what? Is that you will be for me a special treasured possession. Okay. All the nations belong to me, the whole world belongs to me, but you will be different. You will be this distinct people. The word treasured possession is just segula. It's references to the king's private slush fund. Okay. So if you think about the king, king owns everything. Sure, in theory. But the king has his own little stash of slush fund that's his own private treasury. That money is his own to use. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. The king has his own little thing, and that little thing is going to do a purpose. It is not merely to be, we can exalt and revel in our special relationalness. No. You will be a kingdom, a priest, and a holy nation. You will be set apart and mediate, and not just priests. All of you will mediate God to the world. So we're back to the original call to Abraham. How will you bless the world? You will show the world who God is. Okay? And how you will do that? The law. I will give you a set of laws such that when people see it, they're going to go, cool. Observe them carefully, talking about laws, for this will show your wisdom and understanding to the nations, who will hear about all these decrees and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. What other nation is so great as to have their gods near them the way Yahweh our God is near us whenever we pray to him? And what other nation is so great as to have such righteous decrees and laws as this body of laws I am setting before you today? Deuteronomy 28:9. Yahweh will establish you as his holy people, as he promised you on oath. If you keep the commandments of Yahweh your God and walk in obedience to him, then all people on the earth will see that you are called by the name of Yahweh, and they will fear you. People will see what you're about, and they are going to they will respect, probably the best way fear, trembling, not quite the right word. They will respect you, and they're going to be wowed, and eventually they will come and want to learn from you. Okay, that's the idea. City, shining city on a hill, like that's the model. That's the beacon for the world. That's what the law is supposed to accomplish. Okay. Which means the laws have dual function. The laws reveals God's character, yes, but they're really meant to be enacted. So God almost incarnated the Torah, God's character, put on the flesh of the Israelites in terms of their society. Okay, that's how the laws are supposed to function. Transform them. It's also transforming them. It's a way of teaching them so that they live out this way of life that other people are going to go, that's awesome. Or those who will curse it, like, I really don't like that. And they reveal themselves in their judgment of Israel. When they see something they like, and they go, yes, they join in. If they don't like what they see, they don't like righteousness and justice, then they will reveal themselves and be judged as a result. Okay. Any questions on this? On the purpose of the Torah?
So by having their gods mirror them, that means like God involved in daily life?
Having their the tabernacle, the ark is like right in the midst of them. The God is like right there and very close, and you can pray to Him. You're absolutely right about that. I'm talking about first. There's a physical sense of God's presence, but then precisely you can pray. God is near. You can pray. You can have this very close access to God. God envisions a situation where He lives with His people, and there's a lot of close interaction with Him and individuals in this nation.
And other nations didn't believe they had that?
They were mediated, much more distinct. The gods are farther away. There's priests. There's people did their own lives, but they didn't have God involved in their daily lives. Where God is really seeking a. Let me back up. You will see how God is involved once we start looking at the laws, because the law has an ethical requirement on the people's lives, which means they're kind of interacting with God on a daily, weekly basis in a way that other cultures don't. Okay. So the nearness of God is a critical feature of the set of Torah. Okay. So very, very good observation. The nearness of God is critical.
It may just be because I'm attuned to it from last night, but this seems very much like Adam and Eve in the garden with God.
Yes.
Is that like inherent to the text, or is that just
that's inherent? So the nearness of God, the God-human nexus problem is all the way through. Basically, is Garden of Eden. It's the ark, the tabernacle. It's the big problem with a golden calf. All the way to temple, all the way to Jesus, and the it's how does God live with humans? We're really one of the critical themes running through the Old Testament and through the New Testament as well. Okay, and you will see this idea being changed over and over again and re-signified to it and changed all the way until the church spiriting and dwelling in it. Right, so this is a place where God and humans are now in perfect communion. But in reference, how many of you were there last night? I don't know if Kevin made the point about that. He probably did. It's a great point. When Moses was up in the mountain talking to God, the Israelites said, "Wow, where did this Moses guy go? He's not here anymore. I guess we need to get a God and take us back to Egypt. We get somebody else to lead us, right?" And that's a very interesting idea. That none of them said, "You know what? We should go talk to God." They were thinking about God only through Moses. Moses was their mediator. Okay, and the problem with their relationship with God was that they entirely relied on that mediation, rather than in any way having people have that direct connection. Later on, the prophets will say, "In those days, nobody will ever say know God; they will all know me." That sense of God having that individual relationship without mediation is a critical part of the new covenant. Yes.
But isn't there a part in that story where the people are commanded not to go to the mountain? Like even if a beast touches the mountain.
Right. Because there's a kind of God says, okay, that's okay. You can separate yourself. But the problem later on was that it was too much separation. Right. As you can see that without Moses, they became lost. None of them had any way to approach God. Their faith in Israel, faith in Yahweh, was entirely contingent on the presence of Moses. Right. So yeah, you're right. There's some distance required to create this idea of set apartness, which we'll get to the cultic section later on. Not this week. I don't think I'm going to finish this today. But okay. Let me get to this thing then. I want to spend some time on the Ten Commandments, and you probably heard a lot about Ten Commandments, but I want you to think about Ten Commandments mostly in terms of what it says about God. God's revelation of who God is. First thing, I want to say a few things about why Ten Commandments is so important. It's the first thing that gets said. So the priority of place, first place. If God starts revealing, the first thing that gets said is the Ten Commandments. Second, it's actually directly revealed by God. So at the end of the Ten Commandments, after verses 1 through 17, God said all the Ten Commandments, and then the people said, that's enough of that. Okay, so when the people saw the thunder and lightning and heard the trumpet and saw the mountain and smoke, they trembled with fear. They stayed at a distance. And they said to Moses, speak to us yourself and we will listen, but do not have God speak to us or we will die. So Moses said to the people, do not be afraid. God has come to test you, so the fear of God will be with you to keep you from sinning. The people remained at a distance while Moses approached the thick darkness where God was. So before that was the Ten Commandments. They heard the words of the Ten Commandments. They were terrified, and it says, can we get some distance here? Okay.
What's the word for sinning?
Hatat? Why?
Just because in the New Testament, isn't it frequently like hamartia, that a very Greek term?
Okay.
So I'm wondering, is the concept of it different here than it is in New Testament when it's borrowing from?
Ooh. Okay.
Greek
So that's a
communities?
big topic on sin, theology of sin. Let's skip on that. Okay, for now. Except I last time we focused on the idea of sin as a rebellion, relational rebellion rather than transgression of existing codes. Okay. And I think I still want to have that even now the Torah is being revealed. Okay. I still want to talk about that. That sin is fundamentally a violation of the underlying relationship and relationship structure rather than the surface breaking of transgression of actual codes. You can break the surface codes, but usually as a revealing of an underlying disrespect or underlying failure to acknowledge the relationship. So sometimes we make mistakes and we break the code. Sometimes we break the code because we want to express our disdain for the authority, for the proper authority. Okay. So there's a distinction between the two. The Old Covenant goes from Exodus 20 all the way to the end of Leviticus. But the foundation of the Old Covenant is the Ten Commandments. Priority of place, directly revealed by God. It's also stored in the Ark. Actually, that's the two tablets gets put in the Ark along with manna and also the Aaron's staff. So the Ten Commandment has a special place in the Torah. Also, it's not limited to the Promised Land. Deuteronomy 5:31. It actually talks about the other laws. But you stay here with me so that I may give you all the commands. So you stay here. God talking to Moses. Okay, I've told them about the Ten Commandments. Now you stay here with me. I may give you all the commands, decrees, and laws that you to teach them to follow in the land I'm giving them to possess. There's a sense in which the land later on, the laws, the cultic laws, they're land specific, Israelite old nation specific, but they're kind of implied by this. Whereas the Ten Commandments was meant to be specific to the land.
Isn't the land they're going to possess just the next thing that's going to happen?
Yes.
So how can you say that those laws are really specific to that land, or it's just you're going to have these laws
Right.
and then you're going to go possess the land and then some other stuff happens?
Right. So I guess it's implicit because what you have Ten Commandments, and then you have here's some rules I'm going to tell you they're going to follow in the land I'm going to give them to possess. So how come the Ten Commandments wasn't after this verse? Right? How come it's in front? I think that's the question. It's kind of put in front. It's kind of in this very special place. So implicit. This is more implicit. It is also called the covenant in Deuteronomy. He declared to you his covenant, the Ten Commandments. It's almost like the Ten Commandments is a summary of the covenant, right? Which he commanded you to follow, and then wrote them on 2 stone tablets. Okay. So we have an argument for the Ten Commandments as being a superior in the Old Covenant. So at this point, we're going to try to run through this and see how we are doing. You guys pretty tired? We're good? Okay. I won't spend too long on these unless you guys have a lot of questions, which undoubtedly you will. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. That's the covenant. Does that make sense? It's relationship. Okay? You and I are going to have a God-people relationship. Okay? And what the entailment of that is, first of all, you can't have other gods prior to me. That's just kind of how it goes. It's like marriage. You will have no other wife. You will have no other husband. That's kind of implicit in this relationship. It's an exclusive relationship. Right? You shall know the gods before me. Okay. Once again, the foundation of the Ten Commandments is gratitude, grace, not threats. The people don't have to accept this covenant at all. They could have said no. They could say, thank you for getting us out of Egypt. It's been real.
Ciao.
Ciao. They could have said that. But they said, everything you said we will do. All right then, let's do it. Right? So they went ahead and did this, right? Just because a boyfriend guy gets you out of trouble and saves you out of disaster doesn't mean you have to marry him. It's just not. It's just you don't have to. And there's no sense in which I did this so that now whatever. It's like, no, I did this, now you can do this if you want to. If you want to, then this is the relationship we will have. You will have no other gods before me. The deity in the ancient world provided a person life, security, and significance. And so the reformers are very, very quick to say, you know what? Even in a world that's mostly monotheistic, the world that they were living in, the kind of Catholic world. Today we're going back more to the pagan world. But even then, we still have an assumption of monotheism. Luther and Calvin says, it's more than that. It's more than just don't worship idols. Whatever man loves, that is his God. For he carries it in his heart. He goes about it with it day and night. He sleeps and wakes with it. Be it what it may be. Be it what it may be, it what it may. Wow, something's wrong here. Wealth or self, pleasure or renown. I probably threw too many its in there. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wow. Calvin said the same thing. We all invent idols in infinite number. So Luther and Calvin have the same arguments, same observations, which is even when we only have one God, we have ways of inventing idols in our own lives. So that's the covenant. I think that's pretty clear. And then you're going to start noticing something about God in this one. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above or on the earth beneath or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of their parents to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. This is a debated text. If you notice, Muslims and Orthodox Jews interpret this passage as forbidding images of any sort. So any kind of pictures, depictions of nature is banned. So that's one. We Protestants typically go with no images of deities. Okay, I think number 2 makes more sense. Because later on God told Moses to make images of cups and wings and all that kind of stuff. So it just seems highly contradictory. So I don't think this is a commandment against art or any kind of, or even the use of icons in worship. Yeah, but it's a tension problem. For example, we have pictures of Jesus. We put pictures of God on things, and we carve pictures. We do it all the time. Are we in some way violating this command? An even better question is, why is God not into being imaged? Okay. something interesting about that as well. Okay, God is concerned with how people perceive him, and he prefers non-visual. Just may want to think about that. Why would a God prefer a non-visual depiction of himself? Like, think about a celebrity. Okay, I don't know pictures. Just write about me. Write about me. So God is communicated via words rather than images. Okay. One possibility is that images tend to have a tendency to become objects of worship themselves, whereas words are less likely to be. That's one possibility. Another possibility is that images don't convey God as well as words. Or even a better argument is that God already made images of himself. That's us. He did a good job there. So it's like that, here's a picture of Jesus versus everybody around you. Who does a better job of imaging God? So why do this? It's flat, it doesn't do anything. That's a very poor image of God. Okay. A third possibility is that there's something about pictures that provide, in some ways, words leave room for the imagination. And I don't know, this is where we get to, Neil Postman wrote this book about the problem with television and the problem of image culture. And he was referencing this passage, where he's talking about, you go from word-based culture to an image-based culture, something gets really changed. And he's talking about how image-based culture changes political discourse and cheapens it and makes it surface, whereas a word-based culture allows deep reflection. And he gives the example of the Lincoln-Douglas debates, in which Lincoln and Douglas were debating over, they did a pair of these debates among these farmers. I mean, they travel all around Illinois and debating with each other about slavery. And they spoke in complete paragraphs. I mean, if you look at the transcript, it's complete paragraphs, dense, complicated arguments for 20 minutes at a time, sharp, complex. And the people there were just farmers, and they all understood it. That was the shocking part. It was a literary culture. And there's something about word-based culture that allows deeper reflection that image-based cultures cannot produce. That's Postman's point, I think. I think there's something to it. I think that we're... Yeah, well, look at 24 cable news. Well, look what television has done to news, right? So we can say something about that. In fact, Neil Postman's point was television should not do anything serious. His main precise argument. People say, no, television should do things like, cover more serious things. He says, no, you should ban news coverage from television. Because that way you don't let it touch, because it's going to destroy a serious discourse. Anything it touches will destroy serious discourse. Make it do entertainment. It's great. Okay, just not news. But anyway, I thought it was an interesting argument. I think events have proven him right in our country. So, if you get a chance to read that book, called "Amusing Ourselves to Death" by Neil Postman. Excellent book. And I think still extremely relevant, even though it's a bit dated now. At least a couple of decades now. Yeah. So, but still extremely relevant. Okay.
How many slides are there?
I'm sorry?
How many slides are there?
We should probably take a break. Stop here, huh?
Just 32.
Just
We should probably stop. I think we're gonna get pretty tired, and there's 8 more commandments left. So let's just stop.
To the end of the Leviticus, from what you said.
No, we're not. We're stopping to take a minute. Let's stop here, and then we'll try to run through this briefly next time we see. I'm sorry?
Till 5.
no.
Not till 5 p.m., till the 5th commandment, I think is what they're saying.
I'm like 5 o'clock. All right. Let's just say brief words about. You know what? Let's not. Let's keep going. We're gonna skip a lot of the stuff and keep going. And what we're gonna do instead is focus on what does it say about God. And I think we did some of that just now. A third commandment: do not misuse God's name. You shall not misuse the name of God, Lord your God. I don't like your translation, even though misuse is not bad. It really means you shall not lift the name of Yahweh falsely or frivolously, which is, I guess, contained within misuse. It's not too bad. I don't like the older translation, you shall not take your name of God to vanity, which
In vain.
in vain. It's like, that doesn't, okay. False witness, false worship, false prophecy, false or frivolous oath. It's all covered. More generally, proclaim something false in the name of God, false theology, false worship, malevolent action in God's name, personal enrichment, pet project, etc. It's all tossed in. You link God to things that are not God, just don't do it. Right? So that's kind of what they're getting at. People use God's, name, he shall increase, I shall decrease as a way to advertise dieting. I'm not kidding you. Okay? I'm not kidding you. I should find those and put it on and use them as examples of violation of the third commandment. Okay? So people use all kinds of stuff in the Bible and connect them to the things they want done. And anybody who uses God to justify their own political position is violating this commandment.
You should totally instead do like a reverse of like my waist will be the size of my father's pinky or something like that.
Yeah, but that probably is, okay. Yeah, my thigh. Yeah, I think talking about my thigh, which is actually euphemistic. Yeah, okay. Let's move on. But the point is, what does it say about God? We have done three things. We talked about the relationships being fundamental, and then we're really focused on, God is focused on our conception of God. He is focused on how he is presented and his role in human life. I'm thinking PR. Number 2 and number 3 are both public relations oriented. How you image him and how his name is invoked. He cares about both. Okay. Why? Is God image conscious? Okay. I would argue, and later in the covenant communication we will see very clearly, is because human beings are determined by our gods. What I mean by that is, whatever we worship forms us. Paul makes the same point in Romans 1. They exchange the image of the living God for animals and so forth. As a result, their life degrades. Because if you think your God is an animal, then that understanding of God determines who you are. And so how God is imaged, how God is perceived, how God is discussed in our culture, in our community, has a way of working itself out in human life. Kind of a natural way of flowing out. So God is very concerned about how God is discussed and how God is portrayed. Okay, if you want to begin with that, is God cares about that. Okay, I think mostly because he cares about us. He knows that the way we conceive of him shapes us and molds us.
And yet he doesn't give us a very, very specific explanation of I am that I am.
He's bad. He is bad enough to take out the Egyptians. He is gracious enough to rescue people and wants to create a relationship.
To take the White House.
Yeah, he can take out the U.S. military. Okay, he's powerful enough to handle the biggest, toughest challenge in the world. We'll start with that. Now how about this one? I think this one actually will say a lot about God. That's unexpected. Okay, you don't expect this showing up. So we think about, what does it say about God? First two, so 1 is totally understandable, that's the basis of the relationship. 2 and 3, be careful about what you say about God and how you image him. Okay, and now we can start talking about God. And here's one. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath to the Yahweh, your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, your male and female. Keep going. Why? For in 6 days Yahweh made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but he rested on the 7th day. Therefore Yahweh blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Our God is a God who rests. So you want to talk about knowing something about God? This is a starting point. Okay? Our God is a God who rests. What does that even mean for God to rest? It's kind of a strange concept. Okay? A God who ceases activity. Shabbat means to stop. Okay? He created a day called the stoppage day. Okay? And he made it holy. He set it apart. He's saying something about stopping apart from work that is holy. This is the only thing he made holy. The 6 days of creation, holy doesn't show up. The 7th day, he stopped, and he designated that day as being distinct and separate from the first 6 days, which we focus a lot on. 6 days is pretty cool. But the 7th day, that's holy. That's distinct. Different from all other ones. Okay, so holy means set apart. It's not a vacation. Okay, so for humans, it's not a vacation. But let me back up before I say that. Our God is a God who rests, which means we need to contemplate what that means. And also, he is a God who says you should act like him. Right? You shall labor and do all your work, and 7 days of Sabbath. Why? Because God worked for 6 days and rested on the 7th. The pattern of creation is the basis for human social organization, our calendar organization. Why? Underlying that is, be like God. A lot of our, actually, let me back that up. Be like God. Why? Because we're the image of God. No, duh. Right? From the very chapter 1, we should have known about that one. Right? The human ethical imperative is live out your calling. Your calling is the image of God to rule the world on his behalf. How are you supposed to do all that? Do it in God's way. Do it the way God does it. Whatever that may be. And we're figuring that out now. Well, one of the ways we find out really quick early on is he has this rhythm thing of 6-day working, 1 day resting that's going on. A couple things about how Sabbath is supposed to work. Not a vacation. Remember, remember the Sabbath day. Denotes an active relationship to the object of memory that exceeds a simple thought process. It's about awakening past event to realization because of its present significance. You're actively calling to mind the Sabbath. So it's not, I'm just lying in bed doing nothing. It's not a passive do nothing day. It is an active calling to mind that this is Sabbath. Very self-conscious, very self-aware, and very calling to consciousness that I am now engaged in the activity of cessation. Why? Because of God. Because I am now intentionally, actively emulating God. Why? The question still keeps coming, right? It's like, well, so we have God resting, and by resting we enter into the sphere of divine activity. Deuteronomy has a slightly different justification. Israelites were once slaves. Sabbath is a reminder and a proclamation of freedom from slavery. I just want to point that out. In the Deuteronomy, there's the 10 Commandments with a slightly different justification. Sabbath is the covenant sign of the Mosaic covenant. It marks the Israelites as being in covenant with Yahweh. Abraham covenant is done with a circumcision. The deal with Abraham happens via, it's about children. It's about producing children. Therefore, you mark off the penis, the male sexual organ, as being belonging to God. It is holy. So whenever a Jewish man in the patriarchal time have sex, they were doing holy work. Okay. Everybody's like, okay. Sounds great. Charles is going off on sex again. The Mosaic covenant with Moses is about Sabbath. Okay. It marks Israelites as being in covenant with Yahweh. They're going to do something other people don't do. They're going to take this day and stop. A discussion, Wilson writes about Sabbath, giving concrete experience of the church's realized eschatology. As God rests, we too will enter into that eternal rest. When we keep Sabbath by resting from our labors, we acknowledge that our life is sustained by God. We rest from our labors because we know that our hope is in Yahweh, not in our labors. So resting is an act of faith. That if you're living in absolute fear for survival, you will work nonstop. Resting is saying, I'm actually okay. God's on top of this one. That's one way. That's one thing you say. That's Wilson's point. Other contemplations. This is by Abraham Heschel. We're trying to find out what this might mean, okay? Because there's not a whole lot there besides what we just read. The higher goal of spiritual living is not to amass a wealth of information, but to face sacred moments. In a religious experience, for example, is not a thing that imposes itself on man, but a spiritual presence. What is retained in the soul is the moment of insight, rather than the place where the act came to pass. A moment of insight is a fortune, transporting us beyond the confines of measured time. Spiritual life begins to decay when we fail to sense the grandeur of what is eternal in time. Time is made holy rather than object in space. Okay. And this time of cessation, a time for contemplation, a time for sacred experiences and moments. That's holy. That's set apart. So, are we saying learning something about God? Is God not entirely about the world, the physical world, its objects, but he's really getting at in relationship with, even with the Trinitarian relationship or in relationship with people, it's the moments that you have, those sacred moments of connection and intimacy that defines who we are, that really strikes at who we are. Questions, comments?
Walton, the
Yeah.
prophet Wheaton,
Yeah.
identifies the rest of God in the seventh day with reigning. He said for 6 days he created, and then he was done creating, and he rested on the throne to
Rule, right, to rule.
Reign, R-A-I-G-N.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people have done that. Some people also say the rest of the Bible is the sixth day, the seventh day. People make that argument as well. Yeah. It's an interesting thought. I don't know what to say about that because it doesn't say that. Right? Does it in the text?
It doesn't say what?
That God is reigning in the chapter 7.
He says it's
In verse
the
7.
meaning of rest.
Yeah.
That's what he says.
The meaning of rest is to reign?
Mm-hmm.
I think he also said
Ooh.
engaging, right? So he engaged with what he has created in the first 6 days. Is that what he? I also recall that he said
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I'll have to take a look. Is it in the lost world of the Genesis 1?
I don't know. It's in his lectures that he did at
Oh.
Blackhawk a while
Okay.
ago.
Okay. I don't remember that one.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to take a look. In the New Covenant, the Sabbath is no longer the sign of the covenant. So Colossians makes it clear. Therefore, do not let anyone judge you on what you eat or drink, or with regard to religious festival, a new moon festival, or Sabbath day. These are a shadow of things that are to come. The reality, however, is found in Christ. So, Sabbath was already pointing to the need for rest and the need for this kind of intimacy and calmness. I mean, let's just put it this way. Our labor gets in the way of intimacy. Our labor gets in the stress gets in the way of just beings relating and loving and knowing and being known. It just really gets in the way of that. And how do we get to that point? So Christ is really pointing to the rest that we have in Christ, the joining together and knowing God, knowing Jesus now directly. So the new sign of the covenant is not Sabbath, but the breaking of the bread, right? The oneness with God. You eat Jesus' body, so now you're one with God. So the oneness continues. But most of the reasons for keeping Sabbath are still valid, but it's not a requirement. Therefore, it's not a source of controversy. Okay, it should not be a source of controversy. Is a better way of putting that. Obviously, it is. But keeping Sabbath makes a whole lot of sense. I actually taught this in China, and it was just hilarious because the pastors all said. The one guy said, after I stopped, I said, any of you take Sabbath once a week, once a month? And this one pastor said, he said, Dr. Yu, we really respect you. We like what you teach. But if you teach this in China, anywhere else, they would listen to you again. And I said, why? And they don't believe in Sabbath. They work their tail off. Talking about rest is unspiritual. Okay, they have turned spiritual activity purely in terms of how much you do, how much you talk, just nonstop grind, and they're exhausted. These are pastors that are exhausted. And they are missing out on the sense of ease and rest. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. That's within the joy of pacing and rhythm and leisure in the life of God. They're missing out on that. And we have a lot of Christians who are busting their behinds, working their tail off, slaving for God. So that's something to think about. Okay. Let's just stop at 4, because 5 actually gets us into the human side. So can we do that? Yeah. Perfect. All right. Let's stop here.
Let's not get into the
We
human side.
defer to Miriam. Can we stop here?
Can we stop here, Miriam? You want to fight? We'll stop at 4. Compromise. All right. All right. So let me pray first. Father, we are grateful to know that you are Yahweh. We may not fully know that. We may not have experienced that. We may not have now seen it. We may know you only as El Shaddai. You take care of us. You help us. Give us jobs and schooling and get us through difficulties in life. And we're grateful for all of that. But what we're looking for is a grander vision of you. Because I don't think we know you as big enough God. We don't know you as the great God who changes world events and world history. And we don't think of you that way. So we pray for greater knowledge, greater understanding. Amen.
Amen.